Let's talk about how you can set boundaries for yourself, how you can gather the courage and say no to certain people or certain invites. I know it's going to be hard because as human beings, we are social animals, and all the time we are expected to live our life in group. We are interdependent. We can't live in perpetual isolation, perpetual solitariness. We are always dependent on one another for survival, for living. And so, whenever you say no to somebody, it becomes very difficult. It has the potency to create, unhealthy relationship because saying no to somebody is more like an antithesis to our survival of interdependence. So, when you say no to your boss, your mother, your sister, a friend, a colleague, you are always going to receive a backlash, and sometimes you can even receive criticisms and can often ruin your relationship with one another. But one thing you have to understand is that saying no to something actually has a psychological benefits. It has emotional benefits. It makes you live a stress-free life and be you. Because sometimes you feel like it is not in your interest to join somebody for an invite or to say yes to a certain, invitation or a certain things that somebody may put in your path. But you are pretty much coerced to say yes because you want to maintain the relationship. You want to be part of that peer group. You want to be part of that humanity where it feels like we are all feeling together. We are all in this game together. And let's be affirmative to one another. But if you really care about your mental health, you care about living a better life, a happy life, a stress free life, then you should begin to say no to certain people when they ask you to do something. If it is appropriate, if everything within you, if you are thinking, you are feeling, your emotions allows you or wants you to say no, get the courage and say no. I'm going to take you through how you'll be able to say no to certain people and still maintain a healthy relationship with them. Now, saying no is pretty much you are setting boundaries, right? So set boundary for yourself to protect yourself against any external influences and all that. And it's just simply saying no. Now, whenever we say that set boundary, what comes to mind is pretty much the physicality, our physical body, our physical space that we are setting boundary. We won't allow people to intrude. But setting boundary or saying no to certain things just go beyond just a physical boundary. Um, there are types of boundaries that you can set to live a stress-free life, which is emotional boundaries, time boundaries, sexuality boundaries, and intellectual boundary as well, right? So, intellectual boundary, what is it? Your intellect, your wisdom, your judgment, your sagacity, and perspicuity about how you see things. And if you oftentimes get, disrespected or treated with no regard because of your opinion, your understanding and judgment, then whoever does that, you must set boundary for it, right? So maybe you can tell the person, hey, anytime I give my opinion, you make fun of me. I think it's about time that you give respect to me. I don't want you to make fun of my ideas, right? You tell him just like that. You don't think of how he's going to feel, whatever. Just care for yourself. Just maintain a stress-free life and tell people for them to respect you, right? Something like time boundary. Um, you have a time that you leave, like you get up in the morning, you have like morning routine that you do afternoon routines that you do, work routines, and all that, right? So you chronicle how you're going to dissipate your time. Like you set schedules and schemes as to how you're going to spread your time over your spending. And you don't allow people just intrude into your time spending. If there is a time for you to be quiet and meditate, do so. And that is not the time that you talk to people or people call you on the phone. If it's time for you to be caught into writing your book or doing a project or finishing an assignment, it is not time for you to be surfing the social media or talking to people and all that. So you set boundary for that and stick to that. If somebody shows up in your office space, or shows up at your door, uh, even at your workplace, people like spending time in your office space. If it's time for you to do the work that you are paid on, whether you are entrepreneur or you are employee, you just excuse them to give you a space to do your work, right? No grudges, just be polite and tell them politely, I want to concentrate on this. Could you just leave my space for me to have time to do that? Or this hour is set for me to write a project, and it is not time for me to talk to you. And during hours like this, I want you to stay away from me, right? So that is time boundary. You set time boundary. And now the physical boundary. What is the physical boundary? Your physical space. Maybe you don't want people to get close to you. You don't want people to be coming to your office. Maybe it could be a colleague at work, and you don't want such a person to come to your office space. You don't want those people to get close to you. So you set that mental boundary around your physicality, around your physical space. Or maybe it's just a contact. You don't want such a person to touch you, right? It, it could be a conversation you're having with a colleague or a friend or whatever it is, and the person keeps touching you. You just tell the person politely, please, I don't want you touching me whenever we are conversing, right? Politely. Um, and he will pay heed to that. That will preserve your dignity. It will preserve, like your value, and people will begin to take you serious because you set boundary and you go according to it. Now, sexuality boundary. You probably have a husband, a domestic partner, or a girlfriend, whatever, a fiancé, and maybe this is the person I want to share my sexuality with, and nobody else. So as long as you identify the person, or even if you don't have anybody, you don't want to share your sexuality with Mr. A or Madam B. So when such a person comes into your life, whether through a conversation, and the person brings such a topic, you politely tell him, hey, I'm not interested in this topic, and you are not the type of person that I have to discuss sexuality with. So excuse me, right? If the person sends you a pornographic thing or a sexuality picture, a prurient or romantic picture, and he is not the type of person you are expecting such pictures or such erotic graphics from. You politely tell the person to put a stop to it, right? That is sexuality. So you are preserving your sexuality, um, uh, discussions, and everything to the person that you want to preserve it for, and you don't let anybody intrude it. So you are setting a boundary for it. Never think of how the person is going to feel, because you are the most important person in your life picture and nobody else. And now, emotional, boundaries. Uh, Somebody's behavior, actions before in front of you, whether through texting, whether through speaking, whether through email, whatever it is. If that person behavior irritates you and affects your emotions and feeling, it's better for you to set boundary for the person. Whether you avoid the person or you let the person know that the kind of language he uses upon you, the kind of treatment, whether it's a facial expression, whether it's a body language, gestures, whatever it is, that irritates you and affects your emotions, negatively. And therefore, you tell the person politely, please, I don't want you to use these kinds of words for me. And I don't want you to be telling me this, right? You tell the person politely, and you are thinking about you, you are setting boundaries, right? So the question comes like, when do you become aware that you need to set boundaries? Because we are all be captured in this social, lifestyle. We are together. We are each other's keeper. We are caring for one another. We are dependent on one another, right? So sometimes it becomes very difficult for us to know when to say no to certain things or set boundaries to certain things. So this is the clue. Whenever you see that you are being disrespected too many times, when you are being, when you see that you are being not taken serious, you are not being regarded with the value that you accord to yourself, that is the point that you should begin to think, what's wrong? Maybe I need to set boundaries for me to claim back my dignity and self-respect. Or whenever you think you are being overused, right? When you think you are being overused or being taken advantage over, that is the point you need to be stern and claim your dignity, your self-respect, and your person back, right? Because everybody has got, dignity and some kind of life to protect. And if you don't become aware of it and do what is needful to protect that life, people will just, ruin it for you. So whenever you come to terms that you are being overused, that is the point that you need to sit up and set boundaries for yourself. And in setting boundaries, you need not to be too rigid and you need not to be too porous, right? So being too rigid could be very terrifying. Like it could just ruin even healthy relationships. It can, turn people away from you. It can create a whole lot of, problems in our relationship and friendship settings. So don't be too rigid so that healthy relationship, healthy friendship will continue to be there. So whoever is supposed to come into your life can still come into your life, and don't be too, porous, right? Don't let the standard or the boundary become too, fragile to allow people to come into your life anyhow, right? So you have to find a balance. You should be at the point of the symmetry where it's like the life is balanced. You are polite, you set, moderate boundaries that will inure to better and healthy relationship, in as much as it prevents unhealthy relationship, right? So, and how do you let people know the boundaries that you set? Are you going to use language, spoken words, or statements, or are you going to use a body language? There is what we call passive aggressive, where you try to communicate your intent to the beholder or another person through non-spoken, actions and body language, facial expressions, and things like that. So whenever you are setting a boundary, somebody invites you to join him in something or whatever it is, whatever boundary you are setting, you can just use a body language, like maybe the way you squeeze your face, the way you you use a body language can just scare the person away, for the person to get to know that no, this guy doesn't like this, and therefore I'm not going to use such a thing on him again. But one thing about using passive aggressive is sometimes the person may not get what you mean, right? So you do that, you use that body language with the intent that the person will get to know what you mean and comply with it. But not everybody will get to know it. So the best approach is for you to use a polite statement, right? Use words, a statement, and state your boundary. State what you want to the person so that the person will understand it. Unless the person is mute or somebody who doesn't want to pay heed to what you are saying. So you politely say, for instance, if um, you have a sister that is always, or a friend who goes about telling people the conversation that you have. He goes about gossiping about you and telling people the conversations that you have. You can politely say that, hey, friend, I want all the communications that happens between us stick between us. Or, hey, friend, I don't want you telling other friends about the communications that we have, right? So you state it directly to him, as opposed to using a gesture or body language, right? For body language, he may not get your intent. And that means the boundary that we set are going to be fruitless, right? So, and one thing you should understand is that you have to reinforce the boundaries that you set, right? You just don't set boundaries and just sit down and watch it to work. You have to reinforce it because people will always go back to treat you the same way. People will always forget about the boundaries that you set. So you set a boundary and you are reinforcing it. When people go back to treat you the same way or tell you the same thing that affect your emotions, uh, te- come to you, visit you unannounced, and affect your time schedule and eat into your time boundary. You set it back to them. You set the same. You tell them the boundaries that you have set to them continuously until they get it. And if they can't get it for a very long time, that is when you come in to set consequences. Like, I'll give you benefit of the doubt. I'll tell you more often whenever you go back to treat me the same way. Whenever you create any infraction on the boundaries that I set, I will correct you and put you on your toes. But if it keeps going on, the infractions, the violations keep going on from you, maybe I'll provide a consequences. Maybe I won't talk to you, or maybe I won't discuss this specific thing with you, or maybe I won't open my door when you show up unannounced, knocking my door, right? So those are the consequences, so that the person will understand that, hey, he is not just setting a boundary, but he's also reinforcing it to make sure it does work, right? So there is always going to be pushbacks, and whenever you set boundaries, there is always going to be pushbacks. Like I said, we are social animals. We depend on one another. So anytime you say no to a friend, it's going to create some kind of uneasiness and bad feelings in such a friend, or whether it's a family member, a colleague, or whoever, or even a boss at your workplace. But be consistent. Care about you. Care about your happiness. Care about your stress-free life. Care about your mental, immunity. Care about your psychological well-being, and stick to that, right? Regardless of how the person is going to feel, the most important person here is you, and you are doing everything to protect yourself. And now, let me give you one thing you also understand is that you can provide explanations to why you are setting the boundaries, but some boundaries, or whenever you say no, there are certain no's that require no explanation, right? Because anytime you set a boundary and you give an explanation, it is going to appear to the other person like, oh, your boundaries are negotiable, right? So you are not, required to provide basis for the boundaries that you set. When you say no, it is just no. But sometimes you can also provide explanation why you think you are not going on that invitation. Now, let me give you an exercise how you're able to set boundaries and you know keep it, and so that you can live a stress-free life. Now, think about your life. What is it in your life that you want to set boundaries to scare people away from? Right? Think about what happens to your life. It can be multiple boundaries that you want to set, and exact people to follow that, and just look into your life. For instance, if you have a friend that anytime you argue, um, anytime you discuss, or you are talking on phone or in a physical realm, there is this, and the topic of politics comes in, you begin to argue, right? In the case of America, let's say you have a friend, and then whenever you are discussing something and politics just pop up in the conversation, happens to be a heated argument, like a Republican and Democrat, right? In the case of Ghana, NPP and DC. So at this point, this is what you want to correct. You want to still keep your friend, but you don't want to have that unhealthy, heated argument because it affects maybe your emotions or affects your intellectual, persuasion. So what you do here is that is what you want to correct. And then you go to the next column. Like you build three columns. One column is for the problem that you want to set a boundary for. The next column will be the statement, the polite statement that you're going to write and read back to the person for the person to understand the boundary that you have set so that he will not encroach upon the boundary. And then the next step, the next column will be the consequences that comes with the infractions. If the person flout the boundary, the consequences that comes with it. So let's say the friend, anytime you're discussing, there is this, it turns out to be a heated argument because politics come in. So what you're going to say is, friend, I think anytime we are discussing something or anytime we meet and talk as a friend, whenever there is a topic of politics, we end up in a heated argument, and always our conversation ends on a bad note. So I want us not to debate anything politics, right? So that is the boundary. That is, you state it very politely, right? And then the next column is uh, consequences. If he doesn't pay heed to the boundary that you say, what happens? Maybe you give him a benefit of the doubt and restate the boundary that you set to him again. And then if he flouts the boundaries again, or maybe you can set other stiff consequences, whether to terminate the friendship or whatever it is, right? So this is how you're going to help yourself to live a stress-free life. Set a boundary for yourself. Say no to a friend. Say no to a mother. Say no to a colleague at work. Say no to your boss. Say no to a pastor. Say no to, a mentor. Like anybody in your life, say no to a stranger, whether the person is intruding in your physical space, whether the person is intruding into your sexuality, whether the person is intruding into your intellect or your emotions. When in your understanding, in your judgment, you should say no, say no. And never care about how the person is going to feel, because the most important person here is you. So today, I know there are so many things in your life that require you to say no, and gather the courage, be stern and firm, and say no. Of course, we are social animals, but your mental health is very important. And when you begin to say no to certain people, certain invitations, you're going to protect your emotional and psychological and the overall well-being of you. Okay? Say no when no is due. Say yes when yes is due. This is U.S. Attorney Richmond Ajiman. I will come in your way next time.